Hi, and welcome back to Thone's translation Nibbles, number 7, 7A, and 7B. And folks, this is the final recording of translation Nibbles, and we'll be going into the book of James starting tomorrow, really, from a paper point of view, although won't be recording tomorrow. I don't generally record the shorter nibbles except several at a time, and so there may be a little bit of a gap here, and I'm not sure exactly how much, but it'd be no more than 7 or less than 4, I would say. So if you're interested in continuing further some of these kind of studies, either under the auspices of being a nibble or under a more academic kind of setting, I'll be happy to do that, but let me know. And if you just want like something religious to read every day, you know, or look at, then that's we can do that too. So the subject today is 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 12 and 13. Now this is a very, very well-known passage, as all of these have been, and the KJV says, "For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, and charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity." So that's 2 consecutive verses that are very, very well known and often quoted by lots of people in lots of different situations. So I think it's a good ending thing. I'm just going to make one comment on this, and then we'll go to the individual stuff. The most obvious differences between these 14 translations in this particular thing is that all of the early translations, and that includes up to and including the 1873 King James, which I just read, speak of a dark glass, whereas all others speak of a dim or a distorted reflection or emphasis that the mirror image is not as good as a direct image. Now the only exception to those 2 statements is the surprise, surprise, the Message Bible, the MSG, which says, rather creatively, but not enhancing by that creativity, "We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist." So we will talk a little bit more about that as the time goes on. So we will now go on over to the 7A, which is particularly about 1 Corinthians 13:12. So in looking through these, in verse 12, there is a great variety of statements as to what we now see. And this is, the now seeing is referring to the how well we understand what the Scripture says, really. It's saying, you know, we see it, we see the connections, we see the reasons, we see all those things. And so analyzing how we now see. here are the many ways it's been said. It's being said. Through a glass darkly. That's probably the most famous one. I think that's been quoted in a lot of movies, and that's been quoted in lots of books, and many of which don't have anything to do with Christ or Christianity or anything else. They're just novels or it's a great title for a chapter in a novel. We were seeing him through a glass darkly. So very heavily quoted. So that's the KJV. A mirror in darkness. A glass even in a dark speaking. Through a glass darkly. In a mirror dimly. Only a reflection as in a mirror. Imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. Only a reflection as in a mirror. We don't see things clearly. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist. Now, in this time of imperfection, we see in a mirror dimly a blurred reflection, a riddle, an enigma. A faint reflection of riddles and mysteries as though reflected in a mirror. And then just on top of that, I was to see what it would say, since we have sort of these two categories about mirrors and glasses, and we added Young's literal translation, and his translation was through a mirror obscurely. I think the thing that Paul was talking about was a mirror. And the reason that I think so is that as far as I know, glasses, that is, glass-made material that you drink from or put flowers in or whatever you do with a glass container, really didn't exist in any great understandable number, maybe not at all, back at the time that Paul was writing. That there's lots of reasons for that, many of which have to do with how hot things have to be to form glasses in the olden days, and so it was much easier to make a flat thing out of glass rather than a shaped thing out of glass. So I don't believe that Paul would have talked about something which may not even have existed at that time. So even when he says when it's a glass, he's speaking of a looking glass, that is a mirror reflection, not a glass of Coke or some beverage of today. So that's my own personal opinion, but I think it's based upon history and science to some degree that, did they really commonly have glass? But they did, you see, at the time all of these translations happened, even the one way back in 1380, whatever, is they did have glass as a drinking thing back then. So when they read something that talked about glass and darkly and seeing through and so on, they just thought that they were talking about a drinking glass. And then later, most of the later translations then recognized, hey, that doesn't make sense. They were talking about a mirror. And so they translated it as a mirror. And that was, basically there was a cutoff there, like 1873, I said, that before the, translations before them. But when you go to New King James, it says a mirror. And it really, except as a change of language, over the years, the New King James is very true to most all of the earlier King Jameses. They take out ye's and make it you's and those sorts of things, but they don't really change the important part of the vocabulary. But in this case, they did, and so I believe that was because all the other newer translations were using mirror. And they thought about it and thought, yeah, that's what was meant, really. I think that's, again, my opinion. The next question, that's how we see. No, is what we see now. Know in part. Know of part. Know imperfectly. I know how is partial and incomplete. I know in part, just in fragments. My understanding is incomplete now. And that's most of those have several repetitions, except the last two really, which were solos. And there's no mention at all in the MSG, the Message Bible. So that's kind of troubling, because although this is an allegorical sort of statement, it's trying to compare our thought process to something physical that people can observe. It is an important theological concept. Is what do we understand now, and what are we going to understand later? And that's that's important. In if you think back to just a few years before this, before the coming of Jesus, then all the understanding was, it's just the law of God. I mean, we don't have to understand it, we just have to obey it. And here we begin to see how Paul thinks about this, and says, well, some of the things we do understand now, what they were intended to be. We know why Messiah came. We know that he's coming back. We know these things. We just don't know how to connect them up exactly, and that's why it's kind of a bad image that we're looking at. And then, lo and behold, the Scripture was completed. Not too many years. Well, I don't know, 50 or 60 years after this was written, and then we know all that God intended for us to know. And so we're now seeing clearer and clearer and clearer what's going to happen. And so it is important that we recognize that our understanding is incomplete now, and that it won't be totally completed until Christ returns. Okay, so shame on the MSG. Then I will know, and this is the longest thing I'm going to do today. And first of all, I'll just read the quotations. Shall I know even as also I am known? Then I shall know as I am known. Then shall I know even as I am known. Know fully even as I am fully known. I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. I will know fully, just as also have been fully known. I will know fully, as I am fully known. We'll see it all then, see it as clearly as God sees us, knowing Him directly just as He knows us. Then I will know fully, just as I have been fully known by God. One day I will understand everything, just as everything about me has been fully understood. Woo! Here, warning, warning. We have to be a little careful here. More with some of the translations than others. We do not literally expect to know everything. To understand everything would indeed make us like gods. Something refuted by Scripture in many other places. But it's an important doctrine in certain Christian sects. Unfortunately, I think Paul really was saying we will understand God's reasoning and plan more clearly, and thus why certain things had to be, even though we didn't, when they happened, we didn't really want them to happen, but we now understand why in God's great plan they had to happen. Now there's another emphasis in this verse, and it deals with knowing God as in face-to-face. A personal relationship is referred to here by knowing. This is not an intellectual knowledge up here, but rather an intimate social togetherness with God. Isn't that one of the most wonderful things you can even think of? Do you really need to know everything if you are on intimate terms and communicating with God? This is clearer in certain translations than in others. And we can look at them. I'm just going to try to pick out one or two that really clearly say these things. Okay. The New Living Translation. Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as God knows me completely. And so that there's a relationship there. The NASB, New American Standard Bible. For now I see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I also have been fully known. Darst I do it? Yeah. The MSG. We don't yet see things clearly. True. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist. Totally changed the analogy, but that's okay. But it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then. See it all as clearly as God sees us, knowing Him directly just as He knows us. And that is a beautiful way to put it. As a translation, I'm not so sure that it says all that in the Greek, but it's a beautiful commentary on what this is all about. Knowing Him directly just as He knows us. He's known us all the time, but we haven't known Him all the time. And as at this time, when at the end of our time without Jesus, now we will then know Him directly, just as He knows us. But I'm saying we have to understand that knowing, Knowing, has two different meanings in this same verse. Knowing, like understanding why things happened, is mentioned here. But then also knowing God like He knows us is mentioned here, and that's a social thing. That's a personal relationship with God. So knowing is twice stated here, and we have to be very careful in not crossing over those two. And that's when we get to the thing where we're going to know everything, which not the case. Okay, now we'll get to the final section, 7b, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 13. And this is thankfully ending on a nice connection without any controversy. So, the KJV says, "And now abide faith, hope, charity, and these three, but the greatest of these is charity." And virtually every one of them says something similar to that. What should we do? Abide faith, hope, and charity. Dwell faith, hope, and charity. Abide faith, hope, and love. Abide faith, hope, ampersand love. These three remain, faith, hope, and love. Three things will last forever, faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love remain. These three remain, faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love abide. These three. We have three things to do to lead us forward toward that consummation. Trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, and love extravagantly. Let's read that again. Trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, and love extravagantly. Isn't that the definition of a good Christian witness? We trust steadily in God. If we don't, then we're going to feel like we're making ourselves a fool out of ourselves, right? We hope unswervingly. We know, hope. By hope, we mean we understand that it's going to happen unswervingly about His return. And we love extravagantly. We love our people. We love our enemies. We love our friends. We love our neighbors. We love the foreigners that are strange to us. We love everybody. We love extravagantly. We spread our love all over. Extravagant in the financial sense. We're throwing out $100 bills to everybody. We're extravagantly loving. So that's a good one. There remaineth faith, abiding trust in God and His promises, hope, confident expectation of eternal salvation, and love, unselfish love for others growing out of God's love for me. These three, the choicest graces. There are three things that remain, faith, hope, and love. So I think everybody has settled down and pretty much agrees there. And then the final phrase of that verse, what's the most important? The greatest of these is charity. The most of these is charity. The chief of these is love. The chiefest of these is love. The greatest of these is charity. The greatest of these is love. The best of the three is love. The greatest of these is love. Yet love surpasses them all. So above all else, let love be the beautiful prize for which you run. Now I'm going to put in parentheses, the race. Again, everything here in this last verse of the last study is all in keeping with what I would call, traditional and theology, and with traditional understanding of who Paul was talking about, this Jesus person that Paul was talking about, and so we were just left with faith, hope, and love. And with that, that's all we need to help others find Jesus, and to therefore be doing the Great Commission with everybody and everywhere and all the time. And I guess I'm just going to leave it there. And God bless you. And we will be back here in a few days with the book of James, and doing a very tight, step-by-step kind of analysis like we did with Hebrews on what James is saying, and we will cross all the bumps in the road and have explanations in all different directions, which is, I guess, my strongest area, is looking for other sensible interpretations other than the traditional ones that we hear from the pulpit sometimes. Not that they're wrong, but we're not wrong either. And it's interesting to see some of the commentators and their insight into things that are different than my insight or your insight. So we'll be going back to the ancient fathers as well as to modern commentators like all of the study Bible authors, and I do now have a full copy of a very famous 1800s commentary on the whole Bible. Is like a whole set of volumes, but my daughter got me this tome that contains all of those books in one fell swoop, and I will be quoting that also from time to time, and so the research, as soon as I get this video processed, the research into that one starts. I have 2 books sitting here on my table waiting for my attention on starting the James commentaries. And I hope you all will be happy with that, and I hope you're happy with what just happened. So anyway, we'll say until a few days from now, for you online, have a blessed time.